The moment you stop being available 24 hours a day, 7 days, you stop being taken for granted. Read that carefully. People do not value what is always accessible. They value what feels limited. When you are always there, always replying instantly, always adjusting your schedule, always understanding every situation, you slowly teach people that your time has no price. And when something has no price, it has no weight. It doesn't happen loudly or dramatically. No one announces it. It happens quietly, through repeated patterns. A late night call you always answer. A plan you always rearrange. A boundary you always postpone. Over time, people stop asking whether you're free, they assume you are. This is not about becoming rude. It is not about ignoring everyone or acting cold and distant. It is about understanding one brutal truth. Over-availability kills respect. When access to you feels unlimited, appreciation fades. What was once valued becomes expected. What was once thanked becomes demanded. And slowly, without realizing it, you shift from being respected to being convenient. If you want to be valued, your time must feel intentional. Your presence must feel chosen, not automatic. Because when you are everywhere, all the time, for everyone, you stop being special. And the moment you protect your availability, you protect your worth. Over-availability feels like loyalty in the beginning, but over time, it slowly turns into self. When you are always available, replying instantly, answering every call, saying yes to every plan, adjusting your schedule without hesitation, you believe you are showing care and commitment. But on a psychological level, something very different is happening. The human brain measures value through effort and scarcity. What is limited feels important. What is always accessible feels ordinary. And what feels ordinary slowly loses emotional weight. When you are constantly accessible, people's minds categorize you as guaranteed. A guaranteed presence does not trigger urgency. If someone knows you will always reply within seconds, even if they take hours, their brain does not register risk. And without risk, there is no motivation to invest more effort. Urgency only exists when there is a possibility of loss. The moment loss feels impossible, effort begins to decline. This is not cruelty. It is human behavioral wiring. Over-availability also creates what we can call familiarity saturation. At first, people appreciate you. They say, "You're always there for me." That statement carries gratitude. But over time, it shifts into assumption. You're always there. The emotion disappears. The appreciation fades. What was once valued becomes expected. And when something becomes expected, it no longer feels special. It becomes part of the background. Another key psychological principle at play is perceived value. Perceived value is often stronger than actual value. You might be intelligent, supportive, emotionally mature, and deeply loyal. But if access to you is unlimited, your perceived value drops. Premium things in life are controlled. They are limited. They are not available to everyone at any time. When access is selective, people treat it carefully. When access is unlimited, people test its limits. And when limits are not visible, boundaries begin to disappear. There is also a power dynamic involved in constant availability. In any relationship, friendship, romantic connection, social interaction, balance determines respect. If one person is always adjusting and the other rarely does, imbalance develops. And where imbalance exists, respect weakens. Respect thrives in equality. When you consistently prioritize someone over yourself, you unconsciously lower your position in the dynamic. The other person may not consciously think, "I am above them," but they will feel the shift. Energy communicates hierarchy before words ever do. Predictability is another silent factor. When you become completely predictable, they will reply immediately. They will never say no. They will always understand. You remove tension. And tension is essential for value. A small amount of uncertainty increases attention. When someone is not fully predictable, the brain stays alert. But when someone is entirely predictable, the brain relaxes. And when the brain relaxes too much, it reduces focus and emotional investment. Many people confuse kindness with unlimited access. They believe that being constantly available proves love, loyalty, or emotional strength. But kindness without boundaries often appears as weakness. Not because you are weak, but because structure creates respect. When your yes has no cost, it feels cheap. When your time appears unlimited, it feels replaceable. Value increases when there is visible cost, when your time, energy, and attention are clearly limited resources. Over-availability also affects your own psychology. When people start putting in less effort, you may begin questioning yourself. You might think you are not interesting enough, not important enough, or not worthy enough. But the truth is often simpler. You removed the need for them to try. Effort is driven by the possibility of losing something meaningful. If someone feels completely secure that you will always remain no matter how little they give, they naturally relax. And sometimes, that relaxation turns into carelessness. Carelessness does not happen overnight. It builds through small patterns. A delayed reply that you excuse. A cancelled plan that you smile through. A hurtful comment that you dismiss with "it's okay." Each time you minimize your own feelings to maintain peace, you quietly reduce your emotional value in the interaction. You teach others that your boundaries are flexible. And when boundaries are flexible, people push further, not always intentionally, but gradually. Human beings are naturally wired to invest energy where there is some resistance. Not hostility, but resistance. Something that requires effort to earn. When you become an open door at all times, entry loses meaning. There is no challenge, no anticipation, no effort required. And without effort, emotional investment decreases. This is not about manipulation. It is about understanding behavioral patterns. Another important layer is emotional dependency. When you make yourself constantly available, you may begin structuring your life around others' needs instead of your own priorities. Slowly, your goals, rest, and personal growth take a back seat. This creates internal imbalance. You start feeling drained, but you continue giving because you believe stopping would make. That change, however, does not start with others. It starts with the patterns you have unknowingly trained them to follow. People respond to consistency, not promises. Not words, patterns. If you consistently respond within seconds, you create a rhythm. If you consistently say yes, you create predictability. If you consistently forgive without correction, you create permission. Over time, those patterns become the silent rules of your relationship dynamic. No one announces them. No one signs a contract, but they exist. When you are too available, you train people to expect priority without earning it. An expectation is powerful. Once someone expects your attention, they stop appreciating it. Appreciation requires awareness of effort. Expectation removes that awareness completely. Think about the shift carefully. In the beginning, they might say, "Thank you for being there." Later, they simply assume you will be there. Eventually, they may even become frustrated if you are not. This is how entitlement forms, not through arrogance, but through repetition. When your availability becomes standard, your absence becomes the problem. This is the core psychological mechanism behind being taken for granted. It is not that people wake up and decide to undervalue you. It is that you have unintentionally removed the need for them to invest. And when investment decreases, perceived value decreases with it. Human behavior adapts quickly to comfort. The more comfortable someone feels with guaranteed access to you, the less careful they become. Care is strongest when something feels fragile or at risk. If they believe you will tolerate anything, late replies, cancelled plans, emotional inconsistency, then they have no internal pressure to adjust their behavior. You may believe you are being patient. They may interpret it as flexibility. But too much flexibility signals that there are no consequences. And where there are no consequences, behavior expands. Not because people are evil, but because humans naturally push toward ease. Another layer of this training process involves emotional availability. When you are always ready to listen, always ready to comfort, always ready to solve, you slowly become a resource rather than a priority. There is a difference. A priority is protected. A resource is used when needed. If someone calls you only when they are bored, upset, or lonely and you always respond immediately, you reinforce that pattern. They learn that access to your emotional support requires no planning, no effort, and no reciprocity. Over time, the balance shifts. You give more, they give less, and the imbalance becomes normalized. This normalization is dangerous because it feels subtle. There is no dramatic conflict, no clear moment where respect disappears. It fades quietly through repeated allowance. Consider how people treat time in professional environments. If a meeting is scheduled, it is respected. If time is structured, it is valued. But if someone constantly says, "Call me anytime," without limits, the urgency decreases. The same principle applies emotionally. When your time is undefined and constantly open, it feels less structured. And what feels unstructured feels less important. Over-availability also affects how people rank you in their mental priorities. Humans categorize relationships unconsciously. We assess who requires effort, who requires maintenance, and who will remain regardless. If you consistently demonstrate that you will remain no matter what, you may unintentionally place yourself in the lowest maintenance category. And lower maintenance often means lower urgency. You might notice this in small behaviors. They take longer to reply. They cancel with less explanation. They forget details you shared. These are not random acts. They are reflections of how much attention they feel is necessary to maintain access to you. If maintaining you requires minimal effort is exactly what they will give. Another critical point is the role of self-perception. The way you allow others to treat you shapes how you see yourself. If you repeatedly accept behavior that makes you feel small, overlooked, or secondary, your confidence gradually erodes. You begin overcompensating, more attention, more availability, more reassurance in hopes of restoring balance. But giving more only deepens the imbalance. This creates a cycle. You feel undervalued, so you try harder. They feel no pressure, so they try less. The gap widens. Training people to respect you does not require confrontation. It requires recalibration. When you change your response pattern, you interrupt the rhythm they have grown comfortable with. If you no longer reply instantly every time, the automatic expectation weakens. If you no longer accept last-minute cancellations without resistance, awareness increases. If you occasionally say no without excessive explanation, your boundaries become visible. Visibility of boundaries changes perception. When someone realizes access to you is not guaranteed, they reassess. And reassessment brings attention. Attention restores effort. It is important to understand that some people will resist this change, not because you are wrong, but because they were benefiting from your over-availability. When access tightens, those who valued convenience more than connection may pull away. That is not a loss. That is clarity. Respect requires a certain level of uncertainty. Not fear, not manipulation, but awareness that access is conditional upon mutual consideration. When you remove all conditions, you remove the need for consideration. Many individuals confuse unconditional presence with unconditional love, but unconditional presence without boundaries can quietly encourage disrespect. Love does not require unlimited access. Loyalty does not require self-abandonment. Support does not require exhaustion. When you constantly prioritize others over yourself, you send a subtle message. My time is less important than yours. Even if you never say it aloud, your actions communicate it. And people believe what they see repeated more than what they hear spoken. The shift begins when your actions start communicating something different. My time is valuable. My energy is limited. My presence is intentional. This does not need to be announced. It needs to be demonstrated. When someone texts and you reply when you are genuinely available, not immediately out of habit, you re-establish control. When someone asks for your time and you consider your schedule before agreeing, you reinforce structure. When someone crosses a boundary and you address it calmly instead of dismissing it, you correct the training. Training works both ways. Just as you condition them to expect constant access, you can condition them to respect selective access. The key is consistency. If you reduce availability once but revert under pressure, the old pattern returns. People test new boundaries to see if they are real. If you hold them calmly and consistently, they adjust. Ultimately, how people treat you is shaped by the behavior you tolerate and the standards you maintain. Over-availability lowers standards silently. This is where the real power shift begins. When you stop being constantly available, you introduce space, and space changes perception. Silence changes rhythm. Delay changes emotional weight. What once felt automatic now feels intentional. What once felt guaranteed now feels earned. The moment you reduce access, people become aware of it. Awareness is the first psychological trigger. They notice you did not reply immediately. They notice you did not rearrange your entire schedule. They notice you did not over-explain your absence. And in that noticing, something subtle happens there. Attention increases. Attention always follows uncertainty. When your behavior is predictable, the brain relaxes. When your behavior changes, the brain becomes alert. This alertness is not fear. It is recalibration. They begin to reassess their position in your life. They begin to evaluate their own effort. They begin to feel the possibility, however small, of losing easy access to you, and that possibility restores value. The power shift is not loud. It does not involve arguments or dramatic declarations. It is quiet. It is internal. It is reflected in the way you prioritize your own time without apology. when you are no longer waiting for their messages, no longer structuring your day around their availability, no longer reacting instantly out of habit. Your energy changes. Energy communicates before words do. When you operate from urgency, people feel it. When you operate from calm control, people feel that too. The difference is powerful. Urgency signals fear of loss. Calm signals security. And security creates gravity. Gravity pulls. Desperation pushes. When you stop overextending yourself, you stop chasing. And when you stop chasing, dynamics The person who once felt fully secure in your constant presence may begin leaning forward instead. They may initiate more. They may respond faster. They may become more attentive. This is not manipulation. It is natural behavioral adjustment. Humans invest more effort when something feels slightly out of reach. Not unreachable, just not instantly guaranteed. That slight distance increases focus. It sharpens intention. It creates a renewed sense of importance. But the power shift is not only external, it is deeply internal. When you reclaim your time, you reclaim your mental space. Instead of constantly checking your phone, you focus on your goals. Instead of analyzing delayed replies, you invest energy into growth. Instead of waiting to be contacted, you build a life that does not revolve around external validation. And that internal shift is transformative. You begin to realize that your worth does not increase when someone gives you attention. Your worth was already present. You were simply distributing it too freely. When you become selective with your presence, you begin to feel your own value more clearly. Confidence grows in silence, not the loud, performative kind, the quiet kind, the kind that does not need immediate responses to feel secure, the kind that does not panic when there is a delay, the kind that does not overthink small changes in tone. When you stop being available 24/7, you also stop monitoring others 24/7. You stop measuring your importance through their responsiveness. And this emotional independence strengthens your posture. Literally and psychologically, posture affects perception. A person who feels centered stands differently, speaks differently, responds differently. They do not rush to fill silence. They do not rush to fix discomfort. They allow space to exist. And that ability to tolerate space is powerful, because most people are uncomfortable with silence. When you are no longer scrambling to respond instantly, you introduce pauses. Pauses create tension. Tension creates significance. Your words carry more weight because they are not constant. Your presence feels stronger because it is not continuous. The power shift also reveals truth. Some individuals will step up when access becomes limited. They will increase effort. They will match your energy. They will show that they value the connection beyond convenience. Others will fade, not because you changed negatively, but because their interest was attached to ease. When ease disappears, so does their motivation. And that clarity is valuable. It prevents you from investing deeply where reciprocity does not exist. This stage can feel uncomfortable at first. When you change patterns, you disrupt comfort, both yours and theirs. You may feel tempted to return to old habits, especially if someone questions your availability. They might say, "You've changed," or "You're distant lately," or "You don't reply like before." But change does not mean withdrawal. It means balance. You are not becoming unavailable. You are becoming intentional. Intentional availability communicates self. It shows that your life is full, structured, meaningful. When someone engages with you now, they are stepping into a schedule that has boundaries. They are not consuming spare time. They are being included in valued time. Inclusion feels different when it is chosen rather than automatic. The power shift also alters how you view others. When you are no longer anxiously waiting for responses, you observe behavior more objectively. You notice patterns without emotional panic. You evaluate consistency without desperation. And this clarity allows you to choose wisely. Choice is power. When you feel you have options internally, and externally you radiate stability. And stability attracts respect. People feel when they are dealing with someone who is not afraid to walk away from imbalance. That subtle awareness increases. Carefulness restores effort. It is important to understand that true power does not come from making others anxious. It comes from eliminating your own anxiety. When you are no longer over-invested in immediate access, you regain emotional leverage. Not leverage to control others, but leverage over your own reactions. Your reactions define dynamics more than their actions do. If someone delays responding and you remain calm, the situation loses power over you. If someone cancels and you respond with composed boundaries instead of silent resentment, you shift control back to yourself. Control over your response is the highest form of power in any interaction. The less reactive you become, the more grounded you appear. And grounded individuals are taken seriously. As you continue holding this new standard, people adapt. They mirror the structure you maintain. They schedule with more intention. They communicate with more clarity. They recognize that access to you is not casual. And even if some relationships fade, what remains is stronger. Because now your availability is not driven by fear of losing someone. It is driven by choice. Choice transforms presence into value. When you choose to give time, it feels meaningful. When you choose to listen, it feels intentional. When you choose to engage, it feels powerful. Nothing is automatic. Everything carries weight, and in that weight, respect stabilizes. The power shift is complete when you no longer measure your importance by how quickly someone responds, but by how aligned your actions are with your own. But equality cannot survive without boundaries. Once you understand the power shift, the next step is emotional discipline. Not emotional withdrawal, not coldness, discipline. There is a difference. Emotional discipline means you no longer allow your feelings to override your standards. It means you care, but you do not collapse. You support, but you do not sacrifice yourself in the process. When you stop being overly available, you are forced to confront something uncomfortable: guilt. Guilt appears the first time you delay a reply. The first time you say, "I'm busy." The first time you decline a plan without creating an elaborate excuse. That guilt is not proof that you are wrong. It is proof that you are breaking a pattern. You are conditioned by habit, by fear of losing people, by the desire to be liked, to equate constant availability with goodness. So when you begin choosing yourself, your mind resists. It whispers that you are being selfish. But selfishness and self-respect are not the same thing. Selfishness ignores others. Self-respect includes yourself. Boundaries are not walls. They are filters. Walls shut everyone out. Filters allow the right people in under healthy conditions. When you build walls, you disconnect. When you create filters, you protect your peace while still allowing connection. Emotional detachment, in this context, is not about indifference. It is about stability. Stability means you do not overreact to delayed responses. You do not panic when someone pulls away slightly. You do not chase reassurance. You observe. You assess. You respond thoughtfully instead of impulsively. Impulse is driven by fear. Discipline is driven by clarity. The more you practice selective availability, the more emotionally stable you become. You begin to recognize that urgency is often Not every message requires immediate attention. Not every silence is rejection. Not every delay is disrespect. When you detach from constant reaction, your mind becomes quieter. And a quiet mind is powerful. Emotional overavailability often comes from attachment to outcomes. You want the connection to remain strong. You want the person to feel close. You want reassurance. So you overcompensate. You respond faster. You give more attention. You You try to secure the bond through effort. But bonds secured through over-effort are fragile. Strong connections do not require constant proving. They require consistency and mutual care. When you detach from the need to constantly prove your value, you give the other person space to demonstrate theirs. Detachment shifts focus from controlling perception to maintaining integrity. Instead of asking, "Will they think I changed?" you ask, "Am I honoring my standards?" Instead of asking, "What if they lose interest?" you ask, "What kind of interest requires me to overextend myself?" This internal dialogue marks maturity. Many people fear that setting boundaries will push others away. And sometimes it does. But what leaves when boundaries are set was not aligned to begin with. Boundaries reveal intentions. They expose who values you beyond convenience. Emotional detachment also protects you from overinterpretation. When you are deeply attached to constant availability, every small behavioral shift from the other person feels dramatic. A shorter reply feels like distance. A missed call feels like rejection. A change in tone feels like threat. But when you are grounded, you interpret behavior with balance. You give space without spiraling. You respond without dramatizing. This steadiness commands quiet respect. Respect grows around those who are not easily shaken. When you are no longer emotionally reactive, your presence changes. You speak with calm certainty. You do not rush to fill silence. You do not overshare to maintain connection. You allow conversations to unfold naturally instead of forcing continuity. Force weakens energy. Composure strengthens it. Another essential element of this stage is learning to tolerate discomfort. Boundaries will feel uncomfortable at first. You may feel tension when you do not respond immediately. You may feel awkward saying no. You may worry about how you are perceived. But discomfort is part of growth. If you return to over-availability to avoid temporary discomfort, you reinforce the old pattern. Discipline requires endurance. The first few times you choose yourself, it will feel unnatural. Over time, it becomes identity. And identity drives consistency. When being selective with your time becomes part of who you are, you no longer struggle with guilt. You understand that your energy is finite. You understand that emotional labor has cost. You understand that constant accessibility drains clarity. Detachment allows you to observe relationships from a position of strength rather than fear. You notice whether effort is mutual. You notice whether communication is balanced. You notice whether your presence is appreciated or simply expected. Expectation without appreciation signals imbalance. Appreciation returns when presence is not constant. When someone cannot predict exactly when they will receive your time, they value it more when they do. Your responses carry more meaning. Your availability feels intentional rather than automatic. Intentional presence feels powerful. This phase also strengthens your self-trust. When you consistently honor your limits, you build internal confidence. You prove to yourself that you can maintain connection without abandoning yourself. That proof reshapes your self-image. You are no longer the person who bends to avoid conflict. You are the person who stands calmly without aggression. Strength without hostility is rare, and rare qualities attract respect. Detachment does not eliminate care. It refines it. You still listen. You still support, but you do so from stability rather than obligation. You help when you have capacity, not when you feel pressured. You respond because you choose to, not because you fear being forgotten. Fear-based availability feels heavy. Choice-based availability feels light. Lightness shifts dynamics subtly. Conversations become balanced. Energy flows both ways. There is room for silence without anxiety. There is room for independence without insecurity. This is where the final transformation takes place. You are no longer trying to be constantly reachable. You are becoming intentionally limited. And there is a powerful difference between being limited and being lonely. Loneliness comes from feeling unwanted. Limitation comes from knowing your worth. When you reduce your availability, you may initially experience quieter days, fewer notifications, longer gaps between conversations. At first, this silence can feel uncomfortable. You might question whether you made the right decision. You might wonder if being constantly available was the only thing keeping people close. But then something shifts. You begin to notice peace. Your mind is not racing to respond. Your schedule is not controlled by other people's impulses. Your emotional state is not fluctuating based on someone else's attention. There is stability in your day. There is order in your priorities. There is room to focus on your own growth. And in that space, you rediscover yourself. When you were always available, a large portion of your mental energy was invested outward, monitoring conversations, anticipating replies, adjusting tone, maintaining presence. Now that energy returns to you. You start building instead of reacting. You invest in your goals. You strengthen your skills. You develop hobbies. You improve your physical and mental health. Your life becomes fuller not because more people are contacting you, but because you are actively shaping it, and fullness creates attraction. A full life is magnetic. People are drawn to those who are not waiting to be chosen. When you are no longer sitting in anticipation of someone's message, you radiate independence. Independence communicates strength. Strength invites respect. Limited access increases perceived value in every area of life. Exclusive spaces are treated carefully. Limited editions are handled gently. Appointments are respected more than open invitations. The same principle applies to your time. When someone knows your availability is selective, they approach it differently. They plan more intentionally. They respond with more care. They recognize that access to you is not automatic, and that recognition restores balance. Being limited also sharpens your standards. When you are not constantly engaging, you have time to observe patterns objectively. You see who initiates. You see who reciprocates. You see who only appears when convenient. And because you are not over-invested, you can make decisions calmly. Decisions protect your peace. Peace becomes your new priority. Not constant stimulation, not endless notifications, not validation through responsiveness. Peace. Peace feels unfamiliar at first because chaos was normalized. But once you adjust to it, you realize how draining constant availability truly was. You begin to value silence. You begin to value slow replies. You begin to value thoughtful interaction over constant chatter. Depth replaces frequency, and depth creates stronger connections than availability ever did. When your presence becomes limited, every interaction carries more weight. Conversations feel intentional. Meetings feel meaningful. Your words are chosen carefully because they are not rushed. Your responses are thoughtful because they are not reactive. Intentional engagement builds stronger bonds than automatic engagement. You also begin to experience a deeper sense of self. Every time you choose not to overextend yourself, you reinforce your standards internally. You prove to yourself that you matter, that your time matters, that your energy matters. Self-respect builds confidence quietly. Confidence is not loud or aggressive. It does not demand attention. It does not seek validation. It simply exists. And when it exists, it changes how others treat you. People sense when they are interacting with someone who is not desperate for approval. They sense when they are interacting with someone who is not afraid to walk away from imbalance. That subtle awareness shapes their behavior. They become more careful, more attentive, more present, not because you threaten them, but because access now requires mutual investment. There is also a deeper truth in becoming limited. You learn that not everyone deserves unlimited access to your inner world. Some people are meant for casual interaction. Some are meant for close connection. Some are meant for distance. When you were always available, these distinctions were blurred. Everyone received similar levels of access. Now, you distribute your presence intentionally. You protect your deeper energy for those who reciprocate consistently. Selective access strengthens intimacy. When someone earns your time gradually, they value it more deeply. When someone experiences growth with you instead of instant access to everything, the connection feels real. Being limited does not mean withholding affection. It means pacing it. It means allowing relationships to develop naturally rather than accelerating them through constant availability. Pacing builds sustainability. Sustainable connections do not burn out quickly. They evolve steadily. They are not fueled by urgency or anxiety. They are built on balance. And balance protects you from emotional exhaustion as you continue living this way. You realize something profound. You no longer fear losing people the way you once did, because you know that anyone who requires you to abandon yourself in order to keep them was never aligned with you. Alignment replaces attachment. Attachment clings. Alignment flows. When relationships are aligned, mutual efforts exists naturally. There is no chasing, no constant proving, no overextending. Both sides invest. Both sides respect time. Both sides maintain independence. Independence within connection is powerful. You are not isolated. You are selective.